to the On Fire Show. This is your host, Daryl Brooks. Satterfield, he is a general, General Douglas Satterfield, retired general, Iraq, Afghanistan. He is the man. He is coming on to talk about Ukraine. And listen, it's going to be exciting. We're going to talk about possibly World War III. What does World War III look like? He is a master of war. He is a master of, listen, this man has studied, educated himself on war. He's went to the military schools. He is a decorated officer. And now I am waiting for General Douglas Satterfield to log on. And how y'all doing today? I want y'all to watch, continuously watching, continuously supporting. Waiting for him to log on. There you go. Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Daryl. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's great to be on your show once again. I think you're one of those great patriotic Americans, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah. So tell us, listen, I told the audience who's going to be watching all about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Just real quick, when I was out of high school, a year or so, worked on the railroad, decided I'd join the U.S. Army. Hey, it's where I grew up. That's what people did. I went in. I eventually rose to the rank of staff sergeant. Had a good time. What I did, my last assignment, I was a drill sergeant down in Fort Polk, Louisiana. And then I decided at some point that, well, my comment to myself was I got tired of officers taking credit for what everybody did. So I decided to go back to college and complete my degree. I studied chemical engineering. I went to ROTC, got commissioned as an infantry officer. And then as a captain, I decided to switch over to the Corps of Engineers. So I've been an engineer for quite a long time now. I spent a total of 40 years in the military. I retired as a brigadier general.
All right, a live general on the On Fire Show. Listen, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. Oh, tell us a little bit about your book, though. You have a book out.
Yes, thanks for asking, Daryl. Yes, it's called Our Longest Year in Iraq. And really what it's about is I wanted to write something for my kids that they knew a little bit about what I did during the war. Now, I did, since 9/11, I've done 3 one-year combat tours. And all 3 of them were in Iraq. They kept sending me back. They wouldn't send me to Afghanistan, sent me to Iraq. And the thing about being there, the first tour was in 2004 and 2005. It was right behind the initial attack into Iraq was in 2003. Mm-hmm. So I was a lieutenant colonel at that point in time. I was in charge of the construction in the 1st Cavalry Division area. And so all the engineer construction came through my shop. And that's what we spent a lot of time building: roads, buildings, dining facilities, gyms, walls, towers, working to burn the trash, everything, generating power, filtering water. Of course, we use contractors to do most of it, but my shop oversaw the bulk of the construction piece of it. And we also built a number of hospitals. We also worked a little bit helping the Iraqis out. Most of the stuff I did in the 1st Cavalry Division, however, at that time was primarily directed to the 1st Cavalry Division's soldiers themselves. Later tours, I got more into helping the Iraqis and more into helping the non-Army. In other words, Navy. We worked with all the services, but the first tour was primarily about the soldiers and what they did. In the early part of the war, I thought it was a pretty good idea to get the word out of what was going on. A lot of people really don't know what was happening behind the scenes. They hear and see a lot about the infantrymen and artillery guys going in there and taking out the bad guys and special forces and all that good stuff. But there's a lot of things happening right behind that people are simply not aware of. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell the story for my grandkids. I did have to take a few things out of the book. I didn't want the public to read about that my grandkids, it was okay, but not the public. But nothing's classified in the book. It's pretty straightforward. There's no blood and guts. I took out the acronyms. There's only a couple in there like Humvee or IED, but other than that are common acronyms. But I took all that out. My intent was that the average person who does not have a deep background in military affairs can read the book and still appreciate what was happening.
Oh, awesome. And I have to definitely get the book. I know I've been promising, and I finally got my car. I finally got my car today. So I will definitely get the book. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, what's happening right now in Russia and Ukraine. And, everyone's, all these news shows have these, former lieutenants, generals, captains, mainly a lot of generals on this show. And I finally have a brigadier general, a real life general who was there in Iraq. So give me your understanding of what's happening in Ukraine right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, this is not something that's easy to understand. As you can imagine, no war is simple. In fact, it's chaotic. But let me kind of start with some real basics here. For those that don't know, Ukraine butts up against Russia in the eastern part of Ukraine and in the northeast. Just north of Ukraine is a country called Belarus, I think, off the top of my head, and then just to the west is Poland. And to the south of Ukraine is mostly the Black Sea or the Sea of Azov. So geographically, the country's large. It's about the size of the state of Texas, which is a pretty good size. So it's the second largest nation in that area, second only to Russia. The Ukraine is in Europe. It's in what they call Eastern Europe. So anyway, that kind of frames the geography. It's got a long history. The capital city of Kyiv, for example, has been there for like 2,000 years. So I mean, the place has got a history that goes way beyond America. Now, 15 years ago, Putin, the president of Russia, made it very clear he did not want Ukraine to be part of NATO. And for those who've been paying attention to Europe, most of us don't. It's just the way it is. Americans don't. There's been an attempt by NATO to grow the number of countries that have become part of NATO. And of course, NATO is that alliance that says, hey, if one of us is attacked, we're all attacked, and it's war on all of us. But they want, and Ukraine was made promises by a number of presidents, including most recently by President Biden, that they would be allowed into NATO. But for at least 15 years, Putin has said, I don't want that to happen. So this is kind of running contrary to what Putin wants. He wants a buffer. He wants a neutral state. At the very least, he wants a neutral state, and all the better if it's friendly to Russia. But he does not want Russia abutted up to a NATO nation. He considers us an enemy, and so he's going to do something about it. Putin also regrets the fall of the Soviet Union. He was a big guy in the Soviet Union, in the KGB, of course, we all know about that. And that was the glory days of the Soviet Union. He was there, and he's sad to see that go. But in his attack, and Russians respect strength. They do. The strength is important. And his attack into Ukraine showed strength. Now, what's going to happen? That's the big question. I'll tell you right up front that nobody knows what's going to happen. Okay. Everything is conjecture at this point.
Yeah, definitely. When I watch a lot of, I guess for the past 2 weeks, I've been watching a lot of seminars back in 2015, 2010, all about Putin and Russia. And, and when I look at the mainstream media, they're saying that he's insane, he's lost his mind, he's out of control. Well, he may have cancer, he's getting old. I mean, they're saying all these different things about Putin. But when I listen to these documentaries and watch these seminars, lectures by American professors and your professors, they say he's a very calculated person. He is not a nut or a considered psychopath that wants to start World War III. What is your thinking on Putin and the to me, I don't see him going past Ukraine.
Well, great comment about that, about Putin. By the way, we're the same age, Putin and I. So obviously, if I thought like Putin, I would probably be him, and I would be running the country.
Mm-hmm.
He does not think like we think,
Mm-hmm.
but he thinks in his own way, and a lot of it is predictable. But a lot of things he does is not predictable. For example, he was telling the world that he was not going to go in and capture all of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was a little bit of deception. Nothing wrong with that. I can understand that. If I was him, I'd have probably done the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
He fooled everybody. He fooled our intelligence services. He fooled our political establishment. And quite frankly, the United States and NATO were not ready for what he did. Even
Mm-hmm.
though he put, a number of divisions on the border with Ukraine, we thought he was bluffing. Obviously, he was not bluffing. Just like Japan wasn't bluffing right prior to World War II about being cut off from oil that we were sending to Japan during their buildup in their military time. But there's Putin is a guy who is people compare him to Stalin. He's not as brutal as Stalin. They compare him to
Agreed.
they compare him to Hitler. You
Yeah.
know, although he did look up to Stalin. There's no doubt about it. But he did not like the presidents before him, Yeltsin and Gorbachev. He did not like Putin. Did not like those guys at all. He thought they were giving Russia away. He
Mm-hmm.
wants, in fact, he sees Ukraine as being not a country, but as simply a part of Russia,
Mm-hmm.
part of Western Russia, just like China sees Taiwan.
Yeah.
To China, Taiwan is not a nation. It's a errant, a mistaken province that is broken away temporarily, and they want it back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some ramifications here, I think, because of Putin being hammered pretty hard by the West,
Mm-hmm.
primarily the West, on what he's done. I think it's a less likelihood that China would do anything drastic with NATO in the short term, which we were concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, I think most of us underestimated Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really, truly underestimated President Zelensky, of the president of the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They truly underestimated him. He is. Some people compare him to Churchill. I think that's a little overblown, but nonetheless, the guy has. There's no doubt this guy's got some courage, and there's no doubt this guy's got some real leadership skills. And that's the kind of, and it's strong leadership skills. That's the kind of thing you want to see. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the people of Russia respect. That's the people of Eastern Europe respect. I have worked with a lot of Poles. Most of the Poles that I worked with, from the soldiers from Poland, they were great soldiers. I worked with them. They were in the southern part of Iraq, where we were over there fighting the war. Had a great time with those guys. They were something else. But I loved them.
So when you was on the last show, you talked about the cost of war, the cost of the money that was spent, and we now look at, like, let's say Russia. We're now like this, a third world country. They don't have the economic base like America has. You know, will there be a major cost for Russia to keep pushing on fighting Ukraine? Because I just don't see Russia, with the economy that they have, starting a World War III. They can't win. I mean, the economy, the
Yeah.
money it costs. I mean, you said yourself you needed, when you were in Iraq. You said you needed $25 million here. They needed $30 million to go this. It seems to me that Russia doesn't have the finance to
Well,
stop like that.
yeah, good point, Daryl. Yeah, and I think you're right. They have an economy that's roughly the size of Mexico, not small, but it's still, or Canada, roughly the same size, a little bit smaller. Um, and I think part of what you're saying shows in some of the videos that I've seen out of the combat zone. And of course, I'll be upfront with you. It's propaganda, but I can read the videos myself. I don't need somebody telling me that. I've seen a lot of the tires on a lot of their armored wheeled infantry carriers that they had dry rot in their wheels. The whole wheel would come apart. You've seen them hold back their Air Force substantially. You've seen them not do massive artillery attacks. You hear it on the media that they're doing them. I'm telling you, they're not. They're holding back. Nobody can say for sure why they're holding back. Even the forces they sent in were not top of the line forces. They had a little bit of special forces in the beginning, but
Mm-hmm.
other than that, they've only sent in second rate units. Many of them have given up. They've run out of gas, ran out of food. They found one Russian soldier drunk in a place that sold liquor. You look at it and you go, that just doesn't make any sense. But I will tell you that if you look at what the Russian forces have done on a map, and that's what we all do, it's open source stuff on a map, and find it in most places on the internet. They are attempting to surround the capital of Kyiv. They're already got the north and the west and the east, and now all they got to do is close off the southern part. Now they're going to leave a corridor for people to get out, which is a smart move. You don't want to trap people in the city. But what are they going to do? I think Putin's objective is to decapitate the government. Most people are saying that makes sense. They want to get rid of Zelensky. And once they do that, then they have their way at that point in time. I'm not going to say it's over, because there could always be guerrilla warfare, but the main resistance, I think, will start to slow a little bit once Zelensky is captured. Now, will they be able to do it? I don't know. I mean, already the Russians have made a mistake by not immediately taking out the Air Force of the Ukrainians. They have simply let them control part of the skies. That's a mistake, because their own forces don't have they don't have air cover, which is problematic. But also, I make it clear that the West has been delivering large amounts of anti-aircraft and anti-tank weapons in very large quantities. Simple stuff, very effective against a few aircraft that the Russians are putting up there. But again, they're not sitting there top of the line fighters. I listened to one of these Air Force generals a couple of days ago, and he was just like, he was shocked at how poorly the Russian Air Force had acted. I can't explain it. Maybe Putin has something up his sleeve, because he's full of surprises always. Maybe he'll do something that's surprising. But at this point, I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. So one of the things that now you listen at the media is talking about possibly World War III. And and they say, well, Russia has all these nukes. I just don't see it from Putin. But they're talking about all the sanctions, getting rid of his oil, pushing them against the wall. But I still just don't see it. So what do you feel about the media and pushing? Okay, it's going to be a nuclear war. People are afraid. People are scared. Is it possible he could launch a missile inside Ukraine? That's possible. What is your thinking on it?
Well, I personally, I think the talk of World War III is, number one, it's irresponsible for pundits that are news media folks on TV to talk about it, because frankly, it's not going to happen. Could an accident occur? Yeah, that could occur. But I'll tell you that the United States has direct communications with Russia, and I'm sure our military has direct communications with them, and I'm sure they're saying, hey, look, don't do something stupid. If you do something stupid, you're going to get whacked for it. But at least let us know you're doing something stupid, so that we can at least not create World War III. I don't think it's going to happen. It's highly, highly unlikely. Let me tell you what I think might happen. The most likely scenario, if you asked me 2 or 3 days ago, the most likely scenario would be that Ukraine's going to be eventually split into 2 parts, where the East is part of Russia, or part of East Ukraine, call it what you want, that's very friendly to Russia, and the West could be neutral. That's the most likely. In the last 2 or 3 days, I think the dynamics have changed a little bit. I have found out a lot more about the Russian army that's in there, as most of us have. We've seen it on TV. We've listened to it on the radio, read articles, and it does appear that the Russians are having a much greater difficulty in achieving their obvious goals of taking out the Ukrainian political establishment. So I think that's most likely to happen. I'm hedging my bets a little bit, because Ukraine's putting up a better fight than anybody thought. The least likely, I think, is Russia loses the war outright, and Putin decides to pull his forces out without any concessions on the part of Ukraine. I don't think that's going to happen. I will point out that David Petraeus, we all know who he is, has said that Russia's going to lose. He said it outright. He has a lot more connections than I do, for
Hmm.
sure. Also, having been the head of the CIA, but from what I know and what I see, it's more likely that Ukraine's going to be split apart, or at the very least, it's going to be a neutral nation in the end. I don't see how Russia could screw up not capturing the main elements of the Ukraine without gross incompetence at this point.
So
I just don't see it.
I'm sure you studied about Russia's military. You know, tell me what, people are saying. I saw something online about the difference between Russia and America's military, and tell us about Russia's military. What does that look like? Do they have elite force? I'm sure they have some type of elite force happening.
Right. The bulk of their forces are conscripts at this point in time. They do have a professional army. They do have. They're like any military in the world. There's some units that are very, very good at what they do. They're given greater resources and they train more often. There's
Hmm.
no doubt that they've got some excellent forces. And I mentioned earlier about the special forces. They're really, really good. Spetsnaz is what they were called. They're really, really good at what they do, and there's no doubt about it. Those guys are tough. They've also invited in the Chechens, and the Chechens that are being brought in are also tough fighters. So they've got some good fighters there. But they've also got units that are not up to speed. And listening to some of the propaganda, and again with a grain of salt, and listening to the Russian soldiers that have been captured,
Hmm.
they're like they weren't even told they were going into Ukraine until they were already in the Ukraine.
Oh wow.
And that's the kind of thing that it's hard to believe. I mentioned the drunk soldier in the bar. It the things they show, again, I know it's propaganda, but the Russian forces are looking like who's on first, who's on second. I mean, there's a lot of talk about this convoy that's backed up and stuff like that. I'm not concerned about that sort of thing. As long as they can protect it, nobody cares. It's
Hmm.
clearly a supply convoy. And we all know that supply soldiers are not up to the combat effectiveness of your combat forces. I mean, that's why you have combat forces. Um, but overall, I tell you that the Russian forces have their military, the money that's being spent on the military has been drastically cut back from the Soviet Union days. And in fact, when the Soviet Union broke up, the Ukraine was the biggest force of all. In
Wow.
fact, they had the most nuclear weapons. Part of the deal when the Ukraine um, they gave up their nuclear weapons. It was a deal made. I forget what it was called. It was a number of years ago after the breakup of the Soviet Union. The deal was is they would give all their nuclear weapons to Russia,
Hmm.
and in doing so, they we agreed to protect them from a Russian invasion.
Hmm.
The West did that. And well, you see what happens. We did not protect them from a West invasion.
Yeah.
We did not hold to our word on that. And that's another
Mhm.
failure of the West.
Yeah. So one of the things that talking about the West, I've watched a few seminars and back in 2015. They talk about that Putin, Russia, Europe, and America what would happen is they would go against China and North Korea. They mentioned nothing about China and possibly Russia working together. And that's that. It just that was kind of odd to me. How they're saying that Russia and China is working together. How likely is that? Do you actually think that it's a possibility? But
Well,
knowing they said that Russia and Europe and America would, if something happened, they would go against China and North Korea.
yeah, I think the West has pushed Russia into the arms of China,
Hmm.
especially in the last couple of weeks, and that's been done in a number of ways. And one of them is cutting Russia off from the international banking system known as SWIFT.
Swift,
And
yes.
they cut them off. And when they did that, China basically said, "Hey, come to us and we'll help you out." So it
Hmm.
was in the best interest of China because China doesn't like to get embroiled in any kind of combat. They see themselves as conquering others through economic strength.
Hmm.
The West, which is a Westphalian view of the world, as they say, is that the way it's through combat power, through militaries. And that's not the way China thinks. They think it's you gain power through economics and building a powerhouse, and they've done that in spades. They are very aggressive at that. But yeah, we've pushed Russia into the arms of China. I mean, they were already had relationships. A lot of people don't understand why Russia is so much against the West, and I think this goes back to World War II. And what happened in Russia during World War II. I'm not going to go through a history lesson, but as you know, we let Russia stand up against Hitler for a long time before we actually did the invasion, from first the south up through Italy, and then from the north through starting in Normandy at D-Day. But Russia was fighting Hitler all that time, and they were kind of left to hang out to dry. They did not appreciate the West. The Soviet Union certainly did not appreciate what the West did there. So they've had this beef with the West for a very long time.
And, yeah, because the Russia lost a lot of soldiers.
Say it like you will, but if you're looking at Putin, he does not like the West, and we don't keep our word either. We say something and we go against it, and he doesn't understand the democracy type system in the United States. And hey, it could swing one way or another based on a president. That's why it's important, I guess, to get it in writing. But even to get it in writing, it sometimes doesn't work either.
So what do you think about our administration right now dealing with this whole situation with Ukraine and Russia and Europe?
I missed the first part of that, Daryl.
So what do you think of our administration right now, the Biden administration, dealing with Ukraine, Russia, and Europe?
Well, there are a number of things that can be said about that. The number one is we showed weakness early on in our failure in Afghanistan, which was a gross incompetence of both the United States military, senior leadership, and the Biden administration. I don't think anybody can deny it. If they do, they're living somewhere else that I don't know where they are. But that was a huge mistake. So that we project weakness. The latest example of projecting weakness, or at least not projecting clarity, because you got to be clear. If you're strong, you're clear. This is what we agree with. This is what we do. These are our values in the story. Some people call them red lines, call it what you want, but you got to be strong. Was the Polish commitment to offer a number of MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. It's just they didn't want to give them too directly. Okay, all right. And remember, Poland is a NATO member. Ukraine is not a NATO member. So they said, okay, the Poles said, okay, we'll give them to NATO. We'll fly them into Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and then you guys figure out how to get them over to the Ukraine. Well, the United States, through our Secretary of State Blinken, said, okay, we're going to do it. But then a day later, he goes, nope, we changed our mind. We're not going to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Jesus, guys, that's why when you don't have a clear goal and you have weak leadership, people don't know where you stand. What's the interest of the United States here? What's our plan? Is there any kind of, what is it? Somebody tell me. I don't have any idea. We don't like what Russia's doing, but that's not a plan. That's not any way of saying, hey, here's if we're on the side of Ukraine, then we will supply all the weaponry and all the equipment, expertise, intelligence, which a lot of it we're doing. We'll supply all of it. We're just not going to put boots on the ground. Okay, got it. Might not like it, but that's the deal. We're not going to do a no-fly zone. Let's say that. Okay, we got it. But we're going to encourage everybody else to do what they want to do, short of actually rolling tanks across the border and attacking Russian soldiers. But we're not making anything clear, and that's a problem. And that no matter how you see it, Putin looks at that as weakness, and when he sees weakness, that means he can act.
So so he's acting right now. Let's say Beijing, they're looking at America. They look at Afghanistan and looking at what's happening in Ukraine. What happens if Beijing says, let's go in Taiwan? That is also a possibility. What happens then?
I think it's less of a possibility that China goes into Taiwan, not because of what the U.S. administration has done or NATO has done or not done. I think it's more they're looking at what everybody else has done. All these companies in the West are starting to cut off Russia, and China does not want that to happen. Could they survive it? Yeah, not a problem. Russia will survive it too, but Russia's taken a big hit economically. Even Coca-Cola and Pepsi, which both of those companies are, have some problematic leadership. At first, they resisted pulling out of Russia, and right now they finally decided to close their factories. Okay, all right, they were a little bit weak themselves, but at least they shut down. Almost every Western nation has said we're cutting Russia off, and independent people, independent companies, Visa, MasterCard, banks, construction companies, you name it, they've said we're not going to do business in Russia as long as this war is going on, and that cuts Russia off. It's cutting off his oligarchs by when we freeze a lot of their assets. We can't freeze them all, but freeze a lot of them. So the sanctions do have an effect that's pretty significant. But the longer term problem is, I think, and others think, is the driving up of the prices of gasoline, oil. Oil prices are going up. A couple weeks ago, the price of gas in my town was $2.35 a gallon. Now it's $4.35 a gallon in a period of a little less than 2 weeks. People are gonna feel that. They might not feel it today, but they're gonna feel it over the next few weeks. And the price, by the way, looks like it'll go up. There's a cost to doing this. People say, "Hey, well, we're moral people." Well, yeah, but you got to remember that there's also a cost to that, and that's what we're going to feel. But who's most affected by that? The people that are most affected by that are those that are the poorest across the world. Now, they've also said that it looks like there's going to be food shortages.
Wow.
And who's going to suffer for that? Again, it'll be the most poor nations will suffer for that. So there's a number of things that are going to happen. Also, the interruption of oil supplies, highly likely to occur. For example, Germany gets approximately 40% of their oil and gas from Russia, roughly 40%. Now, Russia may say, "Hey, Germans, you're ticking me off. You keep sending those Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons to the Ukraine. We're going to cut you off." Now, will they do that? That means cutting off their money supply too, because they got to have money.
Yes.
But yeah, they can hammer Germany pretty hard right now. And I mean, already the cost of fuel in Europe is way beyond what we're experiencing here in the United States.
Oh yeah, and that's what they're talking about. I think the price of fuel for people bringing gas in London is what, $8-9 an hour. I mean $9 a gallon. That wow. California, you're looking at what, $6-7 a gallon. So this thing is definitely playing some type of role in what's happening all in America, but all around the world. So to me, when I look at what's happening in the media, and I'm sure when you were in Iraq, I'm sure you've seen the media talk about the propaganda machine and your thoughts on that, the media propaganda machine, and how it works to affects people thinking about what's really happening in our society.
Yeah, what I think most of us were surprised that Russia did not have an effective propaganda machine from the beginning. I think that's why that was is unknown. In addition, their cyber attacks were also at a very low level.
Yeah,
so we were surprised. Yeah, we were surprised on both the cyber attack level and on the propaganda side. So I'll stick with the propaganda just for a little bit. I tell you who looks like they're pretty darn good at it are the Ukrainians. They're pretty good at the propaganda side of the house. I was just watching a YouTube video of a little girl, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, singing. Remember, the movie Frozen, the Disney movie Frozen. It seems like all the little kids just love that movie. There's a song in there called "Let It Go," and it's a very popular song. I mean, even my granddaughter can sing it. She dances. She has the costume. I mean, it's like the big thing for little kids. This little girl was singing the song "Let It Go" in a bomb shelter. Now it was being sung in Russian, because that's the language they speak for the most part, the dialect of the Russian language. And you could tell it was a song by the way she sang, and it was so heart-wrenching. True, it was absolutely true. She was singing it. Still propaganda. The whole idea is to pull at your heartstrings, and it works. I mean, you look at it and it works. It was like I mentioned also earlier, I saw videos of the drunken Russian soldier in a liquor store. I saw a large number of Russian soldiers giving up, putting their hands up and surrendering, calling their folks at home on a Ukrainian cell phone saying, "Mom, I'm captured by the Ukrainians." Uh, it's true. So you get that kind of propaganda, and there's no doubt that's there. You get the propaganda that's an attempt to mislead as well. Obviously, it's an attempt to mislead. You get a lot of false propaganda, but propaganda is best when it's used mixed in with a lot of truths. The latest one I saw from Russia is that the United States was constructing biochemical warfare labs in the Ukraine to use against Russia.
I've seen that. As a matter of fact,
or
it was on
they're
Fox News.
yeah, or the question really is, do we have bio research labs in the Ukraine? It's my understanding we do. And, is it a biological warfare? I don't think so. But I mean, why would you put it there? If you're going to do it, why would you put it there? That's a little. I would think it'd be a little risky. Put it somewhere else, like further west.
Yeah.
So you've got Russia playing off of that, saying, "Oh, the United States is involved in WMD, weapons of mass destruction," which means if they're using it, we're not going to use. Russia says, and Putin has said, we're not going to use weapons of mass destruction first. Only if the West does. Well, that's a pretext now. We call it a false flag operation. In other words, they use that as a pretext to do something with WMD. So they say, hey, maybe we'll use biological warfare ourselves, or maybe we'll use a tactical nuke. You guys are already using the WMD against us, so we can just turn right around and use it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be careful. That's where mistakes can be made easily. I just saw where the Undersecretary of State of the Department of State, I believe, I can't remember the lady's name, I think it's Newland, who admitted that there were biological research facilities being funded by the United States in the Ukraine. There were a few of them. Hey, there's always places where you're doing viral research. Viral research is an important part of, attacking diseases that are newly emerging. On the other hand, you've got problems like we had in Wuhan, China, where we had the supposedly this coronavirus escaped and has killed over 1 million people worldwide. We haven't got to the bottom of that. That's another issue. So I think Fauci, who works for the administration, has been in the highest paid civil servant in the entire United States. He's kind of been hiding lately. I think he's kind of afraid at this point, because he oversaw a lot of that viral research funding, gain of function research, they call it, where you're taking regular viruses and making them more potent. Okay, I think the world needs to talk about that a little bit. Not a good thing. But I'll tell you, from a military standpoint, bioweapons don't really mean much, frankly, because they take a long time to act, and if you've had your shots and done that kind of stuff, really doesn't have much effect on you. The big worry of any military operation is the use of tactical nuclear weapons. That's a problem.
So explain to the people that are watching, what are tactical nuclear weapons?
Say that once again, Daryl.
Explain to us, for those who are watching, what are tactical nuclear weapons?
Yeah, what Russia has in terms of tactical nuclear weapons, they consider that as just part of their procedures for taking over a place. They're sensitive to the Western nations' sensitivity to nuclear weapons. We are highly sensitive to nuclear power and highly sensitive to nuclear weapons. Russia is not so much. I think because when there's warfare, they take a different approach to us. We would rather save a pilot and lose 100 airplanes. They would rather lose 100 pilots and save one airplane. I mean, their ideas of human life are a little bit different. They're tough. I mean, that's how you look at them. They're pretty tough. The biggest scare on the battlefield, though, is not biological or nuclear weapons, frankly. Nuclear is less likely to be happening, is chemical warfare. And that's a problem. That scares the heck out of you. I don't, and obviously the Russians possess it. I've not heard anything on any intel briefings at all that have anything to do with the chemical weapons. Now, that's the one that is really scary. That's the ones we actually had to deal with in Iraq, because there were chemical weapons in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
People today say there's no WMD ever found in Iraq. That's absolutely false. There were no nuclear weapons found in Iraq that we thought were there. That's true. But there were lots of chemical weapons. In fact, it was huge quantities of weaponized chemical weapons in Iraq. I've told that to a lot of people, and they just go, hey, look, it's old stuff. Okay, stick your hand into it and tell me how old it is. It'll kill you so fast you won't even know what's happening to you. Sarin gas, it's old stuff. It's back from, it's a nerve agent. It's been around for over 100 years. Mustard gas, of course, was used during World War II. You got a lot of that in Iraq. We found it. We were destroying it. When I left, we were still destroying it. I don't know what happened since, because all the information that I used to be able to access over the internet now has been shut down. So I don't know what's happening. Somebody's hiding stuff, I guess, about the chemical weapons in Iraq. But I don't think WMD is going to be used there. It doesn't make any sense. Everybody's a loser. Nobody gets anything out of it. It was mainly designed to stop the Russian horde from coming across the Fulda Gap in the northern part of Europe, attacking into Germany and wiping and taking over Europe. Well, that's not going to happen. Yeah. So I don't think we have to worry about WMD. It's there, but I don't think it's a factor. I don't think anybody's going to believe it's going to be a factor in this war either.
Oh, all right. Well, listen, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. You gave us a wealth of knowledge. You are the man. And you want to talk about your book one more time? The name of your book is?
Yeah, and thanks for the confidence, Daryl. I appreciate it. I consider you a good friend. Always like seeing you. Always like seeing you at the gun shows. It's one of my favorite places.
The old show.
Yeah. People who want to hear a little bit about what really happened in Iraq, not the. If you listen to the media, if you listen to the news, if you listen to the politicians, you're not going to get the real story. If you want the real story, if you want to see what heroes really do, if you want to see what it's like to be in a combat zone, I think I did a pretty good job of describing that to the people, the things that are going on every single day. It was amazing. I served with some of the greatest people I've ever served with in my entire life in Iraq. I met some wonderful people. They're identified in the book. There are also a few assholes, and I identify some of them in the book as well. And I don't mind saying that. One of them has my last name. I'll tell you that the people there overall were the best, because we only sent our best and brightest there to fight, and that's the good part. Russia, on the other hand, is not sending their best and brightest to fight in Ukraine. But if you get a chance, you can find my book on Amazon. Just search my name, Doug Satterfield, or if you type in Our Longest Year in Iraq, it'll pop right up. I hope some of your listeners go out and get a chance and download it. Give me a review. I'd like to get my reviews up. Daryl, I know you're going to give me a review soon.
Yes, definitely.
So read the book.
Yes, definitely. So I was asking one question. Talk about the difference between, what do you think the difference is going into an Iraq and in Afghanistan and going into Ukraine? What would happen if the American forces did have to go into Ukraine and go into Russia? What would happen? What is the do they have the same type of area, and atmosphere when you go in? Know that Afghanistan has a lot of hills, and Iraq has a lot of hills and tunnels, and the whole scenery is has to be different from Ukraine.
Well, yes, there are some massive differences. The country of Iraq is closer to a first world nation, number one. Saddam Hussein was, in fact, a dictator. There's no doubt about it, no matter how you look at it. A religious dictator, but nonetheless a dictator. His military was very weak. They had a large number of them. They have a large amount of equipment, poorly maintained, very much like the Russian stuff is today. But you got to remember that the United States military is a very powerful force, very well led, very well equipped, trains often, and we have the money and the resources to do it. So when we went in, and we also had great intelligence of what was happening on the ground, where the enemy were, and so we were able to effectively take on the Iraqi military quickly and deal with them. In fact, the war lasted just a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, a little bit different. You're talking a government there, the Taliban, but they don't really have a fighting force in the traditional sense. They're more like an advanced warlord, different type of stuff. Russia had a hard time with them. We had a hard time with them. We embarrassed ourselves. This is what happens. Afghanistan is what happens when you don't have clear goals again and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
strong leadership. So those are the two differences between, excuse me, between Afghanistan, Iraq, as compared to the Ukraine. The Ukraine, the people are more similar to us culturally, very similar to us, and they are fighting like dogs, man. They are fighters. Where the military in Iraq and it just they were not fighters. You know, I guess
Mm-hmm.
they were lovers because they certainly weren't fighters.
Yeah.
Now, some of their military were pretty decent, but there was no way they could ever stand up to us. Just simply
Mm-hmm.
was not possible to do.
Yeah.
And that's why they lost every battle. I mean, they would bloody our nose, like at the Second Battle of Fallujah. They bloodied us pretty good, but the Marines were able to crush them pretty effectively at the Second Battle of Fallujah in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of thing shows when the U.S. military gets going, there's nothing you're going to do. You can't stop our military. In fact, that's when nobody wants to fight us because we're simply just stronger than they are. We
Mm-hmm.
outnumber almost everybody else. We have the most resources, and we often have the will to do it, to use it. Our will doesn't hold very long, but at least we have the will. And if you make it a short war, we can be very successful at it. But the American people have always been behind our military. I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that changing today, and that's very sad. I think that's a reflection on the poor leadership provided at the most senior level of the military. Obviously, the Biden administration has created a significant problem with our U.S. military because they're focused more upon white privilege and what color flag they're flying today,
Mm-hmm.
rather than actually focusing on their primary mission, which is to fight, which is to deter war. And when you don't deter it, to actually engage and win in war.
Yeah.
They're not interested in our main effort anymore. And that's sad. So our military is sliding downward. It's not ineffective, but it's certainly our combat power has been reduced significantly because our people are focusing on things that have nothing to do with why they're there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think it's important to, for people like the Secretary of Defense, which is Lloyd Austin, to get the hell out, so you can let somebody who's competent get in
Yes.
there. And
Yes.
Blinken, who's the Secretary of State, he's part of the Three Stooges also. He needs to get out of there too because he's not doing a very good job. In fact, he's one of the problems in Afghanistan because he allowed some of the stuff to happen there to happen. So both those guys are again part of the Three Stooges that need to get the heck out of what they're doing.
Yes. Let's go, Brandon. Listen, I want. Listen, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. You've been a blessing. Your wealth of knowledge, and thank you for coming on. And people go out and get the book. Uh, Thank you for coming on the On Fire show, and you're welcome to come on anytime you want to. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. And to all your listeners, you have a wonderful evening.
We're gonna send this out. We're gonna send this out all across the nation. Yes.
Sounds good.
Thanks to the general. Okay. Take care. Hi, everybody. This is Daryl McKell-Brooks of the On Fire show. That was General Satterfield, a real life general on the On Fire show. I was so excited. I hope he I hope he answered a lot of questions for you all about what's happening in Ukraine, about what's happening in Russia, America, Europe. What's the possibilities of World War III, possibilities, what's really happening. You heard it from a real live general, and he's right here in New Jersey, a general that has a wealth of knowledge and understanding of what's happening. Okay, this is Daryl McKell-Brooks of the On Fire show. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Okay, thank you all for watching the On Fire show. Listen, we all have to get along. We have to pray, talk to each other. Boy, I need some more water. It's just, I gotta get some more. Hold on. There's some good water. Listen, we all got to pray, talk to each other. Prepare yourself. Also, talk to God. Be close to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Pray every day. Pray once, twice, 3 times a day if you want, if you have to. Listen, you have to be prayed up because you don't know what could happen. Any types of mistakes could happen. So you got to talk to God, talk to your family. Listen, get water, get food, get things you need. Listen, get tents, all these things you need to be prepared. I tell people this all the time. You have to get prepared because you don't know what's going to happen. Listen, buy your ammo, buy your guns, protect yourself, your family, your property, anything, any type of scenario could happen because, you never know with this type of government that we have in America. So you have to prepare yourself. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to them about what's really happening in our society. All right, talk to them around what's happening in your society, what's happening around the world. This is the On the Fire Show. And I just want to thank you all for watching and supporting. Please spread the message. All right, talk, like I said, talk to yourself, talk to God, pray, be prayed up because anything can happen. Anything. All right. Thank you all for watching. And as the great Martin Luther King said, that we're all caught up in this great inescapable networking mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And that I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be unless I am what I ought to be. Then he quotes the poet John Donne and says, no man is an island, every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Then he goes on to say that any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore, never send to know whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. It tolls for thee. Thank you all for watching the On Fire Show. Welcome to America, people. Wake up. Thanks, General Satterfield. You're the man. Peace.